Hi, it's Steph, and I'm at the Home Depot, and they have a bunch of new beautiful perennials and shrubs. So let's go ahead and take a look at the June inventory at the Home Depot. And a really pretty perennial that I'm seeing for the first time at garden centers and nurseries this year is the painted daisy. You can see this one here is in a really beautiful hot pink magenta color. They also come in this shade of like lavender pink, just really pretty. Now these are very similar in shape to the traditional garden daisy that is usually white in color, but these come in shades of pink and purple, like that lavender color, as well as red. I've actually grown these from seed before, and the variety that I had almost looked red, and so I didn't prefer red in my garden, so I passed them along to a friend who would enjoy them more, but I really love these pink shades here. So let's check out some specs on the painted daisy. You can actually see here in the photo that there are colors of red and pinks and that lavender purple color. And this one is called the Robinson Hybrid Painted Daisy. It is a perennial for full sun. These containers here are $9.98, and they get to be 18 to 24 inches in height. They need 18-inch spacing. It says water when dry and hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, so very hardy. And they bloom early spring through summer. This is what the foliage looks like. It almost looks like parsley. And it's been raining a lot, so these are looking a little bit beat down from the heavy rain that we're getting, but a very pretty plant. And one of my absolute favorite perennials is Nepeta, also known as catmint. It is part of the mint family, and the deer and rabbit don't touch it because it has a fragrance that's off-putting to them. It has a really long bloom season, so for me it blooms from mid-spring all the way through fall. And once it has its first flush of blooms, if you cut the plant down to the bottom, leave just a few inches, it will then reflush with a second set of blooms, and then it'll have sporadic reblooming throughout the whole season. The pollinators absolutely love them. There's been bees all over this Nepeta, and the color pairs so beautifully with other things in the garden. So this is a really great perennial. Now Nepeta, just like salvias and Russian sage, those upright purple perennials, they like a soil that leans dry, so a well-draining soil, and they also like full sun, and that will keep them from flopping in the center. So if you have Nepeta, salvia, or Russian sage that flops, it could be that they're either not getting enough sun or they're getting too much water. And another perennial that is wonderful in the garden, and look how beautifully it's pairing with that purple Nepeta, is this yellow plant here called yarrow or achillea. This is another great perennial. I'm actually looking for some new yarrow because the one that I had, it was a beautiful variety called Tutti Frutti Apricot Delight, and it succumbed to the moisture in the bed that I had it planted in, and it didn't really return this year. I have just a couple of small sprouts. So I'm looking for some new yarrow, but this is another plant that likes soil that leans dry, that doesn't keep too much moisture. Otherwise it will succumb to something called crown root rot, and it'll just die back. It just won't come back for you. So really important, dry, well draining soil, full sun to keep it from flopping. But look how beautiful that looks together. Yellow and purple are opposite on the color wheel, so they're really complementary to each other. Now let me tell you the varieties on these. So the yarrow is called, let's see, this variety is Little Moonshine, and the Moonshine variety is the yellow blooms with this blue-gray kind of silvery foliage. And this one gets 9 to 12 inches in height, needs 10 to 12 inch spacing, water when dry, and hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit, so pretty hardy. And it blooms early summer through mid-fall. You can see the color of the foliage there. And the Nepeta that we looked at, the variety is called Junior Walker, and it gets to be 16 to 18 inches in height. It needs 18 to 24 inch spacing, water when dry, and hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and it blooms late spring through fall. With catmint, there are different varieties that have different sizes, so they could be different heights as well as different widths. So you're sure to find one that fits your garden size. And another really great perennial for attracting pollinators and just for the perennial border is bee balm, also known as Monarda. Now this one has a really nice fragrance on the foliage. It smells like bergamot. One thing that you should know about bee balm or Monarda is that it does sometimes succumb to something called powdery mildew. So it's really important to provide it proper spacing so that it has good airflow and lower the likelihood of getting powdery mildew, which just looks like a white powder on the foliage. Now it doesn't always kill your plant, but it can make it look unsightly and unhealthy. So in order to prevent that, you just want to read the instructions of what it says for spacing and plant your plant accordingly. So this variety here is Bee Balm Monarda Be Mine. It gets to be 15 to 18 inches in height. It needs 18 to 20 inch spacing. So that's how far you would place it from other plants. Water when dry, and it is hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit, and it blooms late spring through summer. It comes in so many different colors as well as heights, so many varieties to choose from. When we were here just a few weeks ago, the lady's mantle wasn't in bloom, but it is now. So here's what the blooms look like on lady's mantle. It has these sprays of chartreuse yellow-green blooms, another plant that pairs really beautifully with roses. And look at that, so pretty. And even when it's not in bloom, it has really beautiful foliage. Now here is some information on lady's mantle. This variety here is called Lady's Mantle Gold Strike. It is a perennial. It likes full sun, and it can also do part shade. I have some planted in part shade, and it does just as well and also blooms for me. It gets to be 12 to 14 inches in height. It needs 16 to 18 inch spacing, water when dry, and hardy down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. And it blooms late spring through summer. And grasses, which add beautiful movement and texture to the garden. So this variety here is a lower growing variety. So there are taller grasses, shorter grasses. This would be more of front of the border type grass. This one is called Fountain Grass Redhead. And you can see it has attractive foliage. The blooms on grasses are those fuzzy plumes that they will then send up. This here has a mounted habit. It is a perennial in 1098 for this Vigoro container. It likes full sun. It blooms mid to late summer, and that is when it'll send up those plume blooms. And it gets to be 24 inches in height and needs 36 inch spacing, and hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. I have a video on grasses in my garden. I absolutely love them. Now here is one that I find is not very bunny proof in my garden, and it is lily turf. I've had this before, and I actually removed it because the bunnies kept going after it, and it always looked like it was bitten to pieces. But this one here is called Silvery Sunproof. It is a variegated variety, and lily turf will send up these bloom spikes of little purple flowers. It likes part sun. This one is 1098. It says that it's deer resistant, so the deer don't touch it, but the bunnies did, at least in my garden. It's drought tolerant and has a tufted habit. And you can see here, it does look really pretty and offers a lot of texture. It blooms late summer through fall. It gets to be 15 to 18 inches in height, and it needs 12 inch spacing, hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you're looking for some taller grasses, here are some varieties. This one here is called, let's see, Maiden Grass Little Zebra. Miscanthus sinensis, and let's see here, it is a perennial grass for full sun. In mixed gardens, it can be used. It's deer resistant. Now, I do find that most grasses are deer resistant. They tend to stay away from it. I think they think it tastes too much like the stuff they can already eat in the woods, so they much prefer our flowers. It has a clumping habit, and this one says that it gets to be 42 inches in height, so not super tall. Some of them get much larger. And it needs 24 to 36 inch spacing, hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Usage and tips. It says enjoy a 4-season garden even in harsh winter climate, because if you leave these up over winter, they do provide habitat for birds, and they give you some structure in the garden. And here is a beautiful purple grass. It is called purple fountain grass, but here in my zone 6, it is not considered a perennial. So this is only perennial in zones 9 or 10 and up. So if you are in a lower zone and you try growing this and think it'll come back in your garden, it won't. I've made that mistake before, and it was pretty disappointing. So now I've learned, and that's why I'm sharing it with you. But look how beautiful these plumes are. I'm actually growing these in some containers this season because they transition so beautifully into fall. So they'll grow all season long, and then in fall they'll have these gorgeous plumes, and then you can just tuck some pumpkins and some mums around them, and they look really pretty all season long. So this one here is the purple fountain grass. It likes full sun, and you can see there that it does say in our zone here that it is an annual grass. And these are 1098. They are deer resistant and drought tolerant. Has a clumping habit. And it gets to be 24 to 36 inches in height and needs 18-inch spacing. Now, I would say they get pretty large, especially if you plant them out in the landscape. They probably can get upwards of 24 inches in diameter, and I would say the height is pretty accurate. But they look really beautiful in the landscape as well as in containers. The red foliage with the plumes, stunning. And a really great geranium that has this dark foliage and stunning purple blooms is the Boom Chocolata. And this happens to be by Proven Winners. You can see here, Proven Winners Boom Chocolata, perennial geranium. It likes full sun, part sun. And many of the newer perennials can handle full sun and part sun, as well as shade and sun, like some of the Astilbe varieties that are coming out, which is really great. And this one here gets to be 24 to 26 inches in height. And let's see how much spacing it needs. 28-inch spacing. It is hardy in zones 4 through 8 or down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and it blooms early to late summer. And it's great because it'll tell you as well on these tags, pair with, and it'll tell you you can pair it with Astilbe, some dianthus, heliopsis, coral bells, heuchera, and lavender. So really great suggestions for plant pairings. But it has a really beautiful foliage, this geranium. And let me show you the bloom. Here are the blooms on the Boom Chocolata geranium. This really pretty lavender purple. And daylilies. This is another really easy perennial, and this variety is a really popular one called Stella d'Oro. And this buttery yellow pairs so beautifully with these purple spike flowers such as the Nepeta and even the Salvia. And they bloom roughly at the same time, so they make a really beautiful pairing. Now, daylilies, even when they're not in bloom, you will get this strappy grass-like foliage. The deer really like these in my garden, so if you are going to grow daylilies, you do have to protect them. I spray a repellent called Invisible Fence or Liquid Fence Deer and Rabbit, and it works really well. But let me show you some specs on this daylily here. This one's actually called Big Time Happy, but it looks very much like the Stella d'Oro, which is a yellow or golden daylily. The height on this one gets to be 12 to 36 inches in height. It needs 18 to 24 inch spacing, water when dry, hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And they bloom early summer through fall. Now, daylilies are really drought tolerant because their bulbs hold on to a lot of water. And they also multiply readily. So in a couple of years, this clump will be huge and you can divide it and move it around the garden. So it can be a good way to save money in the garden by dividing the perennials you already have and spreading them around. Wow, check out this stunning garden phlox in this magenta pink color. So pretty. And even the stems have dark coloring to them. You see that? This is gorgeous and really eye-catching. Phlox is like Monarda in the sense that it needs proper airflow in order to prevent powdery mildew. So this is another perennial that you certainly want to give proper spacing to. This one is all budded up. I really love this magenta color. Let's check out the specs on this variety. It is in the larger, colorful perennial pots by Home Depot. And this one is called Garden Phlox Super Kapow Fuchsia. And it gets to be 24 to 40 inches in height. It needs 18 to 24 inch spacing, water when dry, and hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And it blooms early summer through fall. These are $14.98, these larger containers. But when you look here at the plant, you could divide this right in the center and keep it well watered, and you can essentially get 2 perennials out of this one container. I do that all the time, and as long as you keep it well watered, it will do pretty well. And check out this perennial with this really pretty dark foliage color. I thought it was Astilbe from afar, but it's actually Lobelia, which happens to be a plant that the pollinators, like the hummingbirds, absolutely love. Now, here is the bloom on this one. And the pollinators love it, or the hummingbirds, because of the shape of the bloom. It has this tubular center that they can stick their beaks into. And this one happens to have a really pretty rose color. So this is called Lobelia Starship Deep Rose. It gets to be 20 to 24 inches in height, needs 12 to 24 inch spacing, water when dry, and hardy down to negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Blooms early summer through fall, and it likes full sun. That's a really interesting looking plant. Very pretty. And it's going to be loaded with these rose colored blooms pretty soon. They still have lots of bleeding hearts, and while they are done blooming, they still have really pretty foliage. Now, bleeding hearts are supposed to be a part shade plant, but they can actually handle a little bit more sun than they're given credit for. So if you have it in a part sun situation, they will bloom really well for you. There's still a couple more here, and that's how they get their name. They have these little hearts that look like they open up and they're bleeding, but a really sweet spring blooming perennial. They're also super hardy. So bleeding hearts, also known as dicentra, they are deer resistant. They do not touch them in my garden. They brighten shade gardens. They have an arching habit, which is really pretty. And they're hardy down to -50 degrees Fahrenheit. And they get about 30 inches in size. So if you wanted to plant just one of these, they would look really pretty as, say, a specimen type perennial. A lot of times it's recommended to plant perennials in groupings for more striking effect, but this is one that you can plant as a standalone and it'll look really nice by itself. And a stilby. If you're looking for a really great perennial for a part shade or shade location, this is a good one. There are actually some newer varieties now that can take some sun as well. I actually planted one last year with dark foliage. It was a proven winner's plant called Dark Side of the Moon Astilbe, and that one is rated for sun and shade. But you can see that these have a really pretty foliage, and then they'll get these plumes that are kind of fuzzy, really pretty. Mine bloomed for me at some point at the end of June, beginning of July. These are heavy feeders, and what that means is that they like a soil that stays relatively moist, so evenly moist, not soggy, but just evenly moist, and they also benefit from some fertilizer. So if you give them some fertilizer at the end of winter, beginning of spring, an all-purpose plant fertilizer like a plant tone, kind of just sprinkle it along the base of the plant, and then it'll get watered in with the spring rains, and then it'll produce beautiful blooms for you. It's a really pretty one. So this one here is called False Spirea Country and Western. So False Spirea is another name for astilbe. This one here is deer resistant. They are deer resistant in my garden. They're low maintenance. They have a mounded habit with the foliage, and then they send up the bloom spikes. It is rated for part sun, and part sun is about 4 hours of sun a day. And it is $10.98 for this 2.5 quart size container. They get to be 14 to 20 inches in height, so the taller end of that range is when they have their bloom spikes, and they need 15 to 20 inch spacing, hardy down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. It says it likes consistent soil moisture. And another hummingbird favorite is this here, and it is called Hummingbird Mint Agastache. It smells amazing. It actually smells like mint, and it has these little tubular shaped flowers that they really love, and it's easy for them to get their beak into. Now this also likes a soil that leans dry, a very well draining soil in full sun. I've lost quite a few of these as well because they would get too much moisture and they wouldn't return for me. But this one here gets to be 16 to 24 inches in height. It needs 12-inch spacing, water when dry, hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, and blooms early summer through fall. Speaking of tubular flowers for the hummingbirds, penstemon is another great one. This one has a really pretty coral pink color, and then there's this one here with this really vibrant purple. So let's check out these varieties. This pink one here, or the coral colored bloom, is called bearded tongue or penstemon Pristine Scarlet. These like full sun. They are perennial. They have an upright growth habit. And let's see, this one gets 36 inches in height, needs 12 to 18 inch spacing, water when dry, and hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. And it blooms early to late summer. You can see it has a really pretty kind of upright, pretty stiff habit. They don't seem to flop much, even if they are pretty tall. They're a very sturdy perennial I find in my garden. And this one here is really gorgeous with this purple coloring. This one is called, it's also part of that Pristine line, and it's bearded tongue Pristine Purple. And it has the same specs, also for full sun. And even these two together look really pretty. Look at that, the purple with that coral pink. And a really pretty ground cover perennial. So this is one that will spread horizontally, and it grows low but wide, and it will cover your soil. So over time you can mulch less. This one is called dead nettle or lamium, and look at these really large silvery leaves. Isn't that so pretty? And this one also blooms. It gets these little light purple blooms. This variety is called Orchid Frost. Lamium Orchid Frost. It's a perennial for part sun. It gets to be 8 to 12 inches in height, and it needs 6 to 10 inch spacing. Water when dry and hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And it blooms early to late summer. I find that for me in my garden, it will have sporadic reblooming all season long. But this is a really great ground cover. I bought one of these. I divided it in 3 right off the bat, and each one of my clumps is already as large as the initial plant. So they grow really fast and make a really beautiful ground cover. They offer a bright spot in a bit of a shady garden because of this silvery foliage. And check out this pretty yarrow or achillea. If you have a hot colored garden, you know, you like the reds and the yellows and the oranges, this is a really pretty variety of yarrow. Actually red with a yellow center. And the variety is called Millie Rock Red. It likes full sun and it has a mounded habit. It does look like it's more compact. It says it attracts butterflies. Let's see how large it gets. Yeah, only 10 to 12 inches in height, and it blooms late spring through fall. So based on its height, this would be a good front of the border plant. Usually you want to put your shorter things up front and then increase by height to create layers and depth in your borders and garden beds. And it is hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And these are $9.98 in the Home Depot containers. Some salvia, looks very similar to the nepeta, but the nepeta smells a lot better. I feel like salvia has a little bit of a stinky smell, but I do love the blooms. It blooms prolifically for me in my garden. I have a variety called May Night, and this one actually happens to be called Salvia salirosa April Night. And these are $9.98. It's another perennial that the deer and rabbits stay away from. It blooms for me a couple of times a season. Once it's done with its first flush of blooms, I will cut it back and it'll bloom again. I actually have a video on my channel on how I get my salvia to bloom most of the season. There's also a white variety called Snow Hill. So if you prefer white, salvia also comes in white and in shades of pink. And Russian sage, another upright purple perennial. Now this one has a really nice fragrance. It likes full sun and a very well draining soil. In fact, it likes soil that leans dry, and it can do really well in drought situations and rock gardens and so forth. Has an upright growth habit. It gets to be 36 to 48 inches in height. It needs 24 to 30 inch spacing, water when dry, and hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. It blooms midsummer through fall. And this is in a Vigoro container for $10.98. And this one here is just starting to put on some color. And so many succulent arrangements. So if you are a person that maybe doesn't prefer to water your annual containers all summer long, or maybe you're forgetful, these would make a great option for some outdoor summer containers that don't require a lot of water. Succulents thrive on a little bit of neglect. So let me just show you this one here in a shady spot. Look how beautiful this combination is. So pretty, and you get so many different types of succulents in here. Now, I can tell you that I see a snake plant in the middle there, Sansevieria, which means that this would not be hardy throughout the winter. So you couldn't leave this planter outside. You'd have to bring it in and maybe treat it as a house plant throughout the winter months, but it would look beautiful on a patio or a porch for the summer. These containers are by Smart Planet, and they are $24.98 for this 10-inch square planter. And how cute is this? They even have a couple of hanging basket options, and these are $29.98. You get them in this plastic material kind of wicker basket. So pretty. There's a lot of sun here, so let me move this for you. Look at that. Gorgeous. $29.98 for these. That looks like a rose, doesn't it? And look how cute this one is. It's like a wall hanger. So let's say you have a garden fence or something and you wanted to hang this on there, or even on a mailbox post that might be out by the road so that you don't have a chance to water it. This would do wonderful in a spot like that. So pretty. And it's also in that wicker type basket. $29.98 for this wall hanger type planter. And if you're looking for roses, let me show you one of my favorites, the Knockout Rose. This is a workhorse rose in my garden. It is so easy, low maintenance. It's the only one that doesn't fuss and give me a hard time with disease. I love it. It blooms for me nonstop right now from mid-spring all the way through fall. I have this variety here, the double pink, but they also come in red and yellow. Just a really great hardy landscape shrub rose. looks like 1.6 gallons for $16.98. These grow pretty quickly. Mine are probably about 10 years now, and they are full grown at about 4 by 4. And they can be pruned each season to size control them. So if you wanted to keep them at a specific size, really easy to do. I actually made a video recently on my channel on how I care for my knockout roses, both how I prune them and how I fertilize them. Now they also have some other really pretty roses here. You can see this one. Look how gorgeous that is. Now I love roses. They just don't love me back. They give me a lot of strife in my garden. This one is called Marc Chagall, and it's this really pretty painted looking rose in shades of pink and cream. In my garden, my roses always struggle with black spot and yellow leaf, and the only ones that I have found to be more disease resistant and easier care for me are the knockouts. But I have to say that every time I see these really beautiful roses, I always want to try them, and then they most of the time don't work out for me. But the thing with roses is they want a really well draining soil that leans dry and a lot of sun. If you have too much moisture and too much humidity, that's when they start, acting up and getting a little bit of black spot and yellow leaf. Check out this beauty. It's called Sensuous, and really pretty pink rose. It's a shrub rose. These are $29.98 in this My Bouquet roses by Home Depot. This is a number 3 container. It gives you planting instructions. You usually want to plant the roses pretty deep, so just look at the tag and it'll tell you how to do that. But this coloring and shape of rose reminded me very much of one that I have in my garden called the Olivia Rose Austin. It's a David Austin rose, and it's actually the only one that is an English rose that happens to do well for me. And it's very fragrant and very pretty. And some hydrangeas, and this is a beautiful hydrangea. It is the Incredible, and it is like the old-fashioned Annabelle that has these really large white puffy blooms. It's stunning. Now I used to have this in my garden, but I had the old-fashioned variety that I had grown from a cutting from my parents' garden, and what would happen is because the blooms were so large, anytime that it would rain, they would flop and be all over the ground, and then I'd have to lift them for my husband to mow the lawn. It became a hassle, so I ended up ripping them out. But what's great about this variety, this is the Incredible by Proven Winners, and it has been bred to have sturdier stems so that they can support the weight of these large, beautiful blooms. So here is the information on this one here. This is the Proven Winners Hydrangea Incredible. These are number 3 containers for $36.98. That is what this gorgeous bloom looks like. It is stunning. Just one of these will fill up a vase and look beautiful in an arrangement. It is a smooth type hydrangea. It is hardy in USDA growing zones 3 through 8 or down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, and it can deal with sun and part shade. Look at that hedge. Isn't that so beautiful? They are a native type hydrangea. They are cold hardy, and they are just a beauty. In a drift or in a large hedge, these make such an impact. And another really beautiful hydrangea is this one here. This is what they call the Macrophylla type, or mop head, or big leaf hydrangeas. You can see this one has a little bit of red on the tips, and it is loaded with bloom clusters. Look at that. So pretty. Now let's see what variety this is. It is the Proven Winners Let's Dance Can Do hydrangea. And let's check out the specs on this one. It's a reblooming big leaf hydrangea, which reblooming is always a good thing. That means it'll have its initial flush of blooms and then it'll get sporadic reblooming. It likes 6+ hours of sun. It can handle 4 to 6 hours as well, so sun or part sun. It is hardy in USDA growing zones 4 through 9 or down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit, and it gets to be 3 to 4 feet tall and wide. And look how pretty that looks in the landscape. Beautiful. $34.98 for this number 3 container. Now, something that I want to share with you about shrubs at the Home Depot. I have actually been able to order shrubs on HomeDepot.com. So if ever you see a shrub that I show you in one of these videos and you're not able to find it local to you, go on HomeDepot.com and see if you can find them. And a lot of times I find that shipping on plants is free. I'm not sure if you have to hit a certain threshold, but something I thought that I would share. They also have the Let's Dance Ariba that looks like it has more of this purple coloring. Now, a lot of times with these big leaf hydrangeas or the macrophylla type, the color of the bloom will be affected by the acidity in your soil. So if you have a more acidic soil, they'll lean more blue. And if you have a more alkaline soil, they'll lean more purple pink. And look at this one here, so pretty. It also is pretty compact. Look at that. This one only gets to be 2 to 3 feet tall and wide. It wants sun to part sun, and it is hardy in USDA growing zones 4 through 9 or down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a petite shrub. Gorgeous. And this one here is a number 2 for $29.98. The Let's Dance Ariba hydrangea. And one last hydrangea that I want to show you is this beauty. This is a paniculata type hydrangea, and it is a quick fire fab, which is an improved variety of the original quick fire hydrangea. I have one in my garden and I absolutely love it. Now, the difference between the paniculata hydrangeas like this one here and say the limelight, which is also a paniculata variety, and some of those big leaf or macrophylla type that we looked at, is that the paniculata type can generally handle more sun. So if you have more sun in your garden and you're afraid that you can't grow hydrangeas, you can. You just have to get the right variety. So this one here, you can see it has these really pretty kind of red stems, and the quick fire fab is a panicle hydrangea. Look at those beautiful blooms right there. They age to this gorgeous like rosy red color. And this is a number 2 container for $29.98. It is hardy in zones 3 through 8 or down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And they want full sun to part sun. And these get to be 6 to 8 feet tall and 5 to 6 feet wide. Okay, maybe just one more hydrangea. These are the Endless Summer Hydrangea, which is the original blue hydrangea that you so often see. We are here in Massachusetts and in Cape Cod in June. These make a stunning show. They are gorgeous. Now they have many different varieties. There's the Summer Crush, the Bloomstruck. So I'm just gonna kind of show you some of these. Now this one here is, let's see, this is the Summer Crush. Look at how gorgeous this bloom is. That is stunning. Now it will tell you how big. Let's see how big this one gets. It says it's compact with profuse, stunning blooms. This variety only gets to be 18 to 36 inches tall and wide. Hardy in zones 4 through 9. And these containers here are, let's see, a number 3 for $34.98. This is a really pretty one. And this is the original, the one that you will see with those gorgeous blue blooms, and the one that the soil color will affect what color your blooms are. You can see here in the photo, this is called the original, and that is what they look like. Stunning. Now these here, the Endless Summer hydrangeas by the Endless Summer line. These were bred because traditionally the older varieties of these blue hydrangeas like the Nico Blue and some others, if you pruned them at the incorrect time, you could risk losing your blooms. With these varieties, the Endless Summer, they've been bred to bloom on both old wood and new wood. So if you have the old wood from last year with blooms and say you got a late season frost or you accidentally pruned it incorrectly, you will still get some blooms on the new growth. So that is what is really great about these Endless Summer line hydrangeas. And some magnolia trees. Now these are the southern magnolias, the Bracken's Brown Beauty, and they have these really gorgeous shiny leaves and they get these large white blooms. But another feature that is stunning about these is that the back side of the leaves will turn brown, and if you want to make some seasonal holiday arrangements, they look really pretty cut and put into those arrangements. Now there is one negative about this tree, and that is that they are pretty messy. They drop a lot of leaves and they're a leathery leaf, so they're really hard to break down. So if you do plant one of these, just something you should be aware of. But the Southern Magnolia Bracken's Brown Beauty likes full sun. You can see here in that photo, that really pretty magnolia bloom. They get to be 30 to 50 feet in height, and they need 15 to 25 feet spacing, hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. They bloom late spring through summer. And let's see how much these are. They are a number 10 container for $110. And if you are looking to add some trees, my store has even started to discount some of their trees. 50% off fruit trees, flowering and shade trees, but it does have some exclusions like maples and like rose, hibiscus trees, as well as hydrangea trees. So check out your store. It could be that they are starting to mark things down. And let's check out some evergreens, one of my very favorite things to plant in my garden, because in the off season, when all of our perennials are dormant and asleep, we still have a really pretty garden to look at with all of this evergreen structure. If you have a difficult spot to mow or a hill that is maybe difficult to keep mulch on because you deal with a little bit of erosion and runoff, this is a great option, an evergreen ground cover. This variety here is called Dwarf Procumbens Juniper, Nana Green Mound, and you can see here that it grows sort of like a carpet. Now this one is a little bit prickly. Some of them are a little bit softer. It says it's a decorative ground cover. It gets to only be about 12 inches in height. It's easy to grow and likes full sun, and it says that it spreads about 48 inches, and it is hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. Now junipers like well draining soil, which makes them a great option for a hillside or an area that drains really easily, since they like to be a bit on the dry side. And the Juniper Green Mound is a number 3 container for $26.98. Here is a pretty globe-shaped or round-growing evergreen called Western Red Cedar Croon Krungle. Now, Tuja is a variety of arborvitae, but the red cedar is a variety that deer do not prefer. They like to go after things like white cedars, so this would be a good option that appears to be more deer-resistant. They like full sun. They also need, arborvitaes in general need a good amount of water when they're first establishing, and so you want to keep them watered when newly planted. This one here needs 24 to 48 inch spacing, and it is hardy down to -10 degrees Fahrenheit. A Tuja Kroon Kugel is a number 3 for $29.98. Here's another great one. This is the Juniper Old Gold, and what I like about this is that the tips get really golden and it kind of grows in a horizontal habit. The deer do not touch it. I have it on the side of the house where they frequent and they never touch it, which is great. I cut on this for holiday arrangements because it gets a really beautiful golden color on all of the tips. And so because it gets that golden color, it does like full sun. So any shrub that leans golden or blue is going to need full sun in order to keep that beautiful vibrant coloring. It gets to be about 36 inches in height, and mine are only a couple of years old and they're already full grown. So the thing with evergreens is they will continue to grow, so you might have to prune them at some point to keep them size controlled. But these are very fast growers. So even if you purchase this small container at $14.98 for this 3.78 liter, don't worry. In a couple of years, they will be pretty large. And it's actually more affordable to buy a small one and a lot easier to plant. So the Juniper Old Gold needs 6-foot spacing, so it can get upwards of 6 feet in diameter, and it is hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. And look at these adorable little blue spruces. I'm going to give you a cautionary tale of these adorable little blue spruces. I bought one of these back in 2013 and I planted it in my garden, and it was labeled just like this as a baby blue spruce. And I thought it was going to be a cute little petite tree. Well, it is now bigger than my house, and I made a rookie move back when I planted it in 2013, and I planted it too close to my house. So these are gorgeous trees. The birds love to make nests in them in the spring. They offer this beautiful blue color that is just so striking. But if you plant one, make sure you give it a lot of space. It is deer resistant. The deer do not touch it in my garden. They get upwards of 40 feet in height, and they are hardy down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, so very hardy. And they need 10-foot spacing. So I would say double that and give it about 20-foot spacing. Even better if you plant it in the middle of no man's land by itself, because it'll be so beautiful and you don't have to worry about it getting too large for its space. But these are stunning. And they get this really soft new growth on the tips every spring that's even a bit lighter blue. I mean, it's breathtaking. So this one here is a Picea pungens Baby Blue number 2 container for $39.98. If your garden is your palette and you are the artist, this is how you want to paint it, with different color evergreens. It adds a lot of interest and just makes the garden so beautiful. You can see here we have some green evergreens in the background, some blue evergreens, and some yellow. And this yellow beauty here is a type of Hinoki cypress. It's a Chamaecyparis obtusa, and it is called crispy or crispy eye. And it is gorgeous. I have several Hinokis in my garden. I absolutely love them. They have a really graceful growth habit. This one looks like it's going to be kind of loose, and the size on this one is great. It gets to be anywhere from 10 to 15 feet in height and only about 5 feet in width. So it could fit in many different garden sizes. This is what I call a special find. When you find one of these really cool evergreens that you might only find in a specialty nursery at the box store, it's always a score. So this one here, the Chamaecyparis crispy or Cripsy, is a number 3 container for $29.98. And here is another beautiful and compact Hinoki cypress that I planted in my garden a couple of years ago, and it is really slow growing. And this is called the Coster's False Cypress Costeri. Really nice tight growth habit. Like I said, it stayed pretty small and compact for me. It has only put on a little bit of growth, which is wonderful because I want to keep it kind of small in the spot that I have it in. And it likes full sun. It says that it gets 36 to 48 inches in height, and it needs 36 to 48 inch spacing, hardening down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And this one here is a number 3 container for $34.98. Look how pretty that is. I love this growth habit on the Hinokis. Well, that brings us to the end of the June inventory here at the Home Depot. I hope that you've enjoyed checking out what my store has in stock, and I hope that you can find some of these varieties near you. Thank you for spending your time with me, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit the thumbs up button, and please consider subscribing so you don't miss any of my future videos. And we'll see you soon.